Bill Carroll with Zenny62 Media, and I'm taking a look at the Bears' recent draft, undrafted free agent signing period, and of course their cap situation. Now, I've talked previously when I looked back at Ryan Poles, things I thought he would do and what I thought his philosophy was, and it feels like a lot of that has come to pass. I said he looked at the roster and didn't like what he saw, and I think he saw evidence of that. No team had more new players come into camp than the Bears. Their mini camp, 35 in total between drafted, undrafted, and tryout players. 35 is a big number. And that number is indicative of what Poles thinks. He thinks there's holes that can be filled by younger, cheaper, more athletic players. And think about that. Think about cheaper, think about athletic, and think about younger every time you see them make a decision from this point for the next couple of years. So the team's salary cap for 2022 is $209,912, $579. They have $16,058,251 in cap space left to work with. But next year, they should have $111,291,748. And if they make the right moves, they could have over $184 million in salary cap free space to work with in 2024. That, unless some other team does something pretty unusual, could be the number one in the NFL going into the 2024 season. And frankly, that's exactly what Ryan Poles wants. He wants to be able to walk in there with the biggest checkbook around. So let's look at the draft for 2022. They started off with Kyler Gordon. And Kyler Gordon was, quote unquote, the other corner with Trent McDuffie at Washington. A little bit bigger. A guy who's almost 6 feet tall, moves reasonably well, but not a freakish athlete. Probably amongst the guys that they drafted, particularly top of the draft, he's probably one of the few who wasn't an elite level or even, top 30 percentile athlete at his position, but the others were. Brisker is a very athletic safety. Velus Jones, who is old, 25-year-old player, but and decent size, but a very old player at tight end. I'm not tight end, Tennessee wide receiver. The problem with him, obviously, he's never really been a dominant receiver. And you would like to think with a guy that age, they'd be dominant. But he's a return player. They have a lot of guys who can really return in this draft class. He's one of them. And then later they got guys as undrafted free agents like Savon Scarborough and Demontre Tuggle, who are also tremendous assets in special teams, as is Tristan Abner. So whatever happens, the Bears should have tremendous punt and kick return talent. I really like their next pick, Braxton Jones. In the pick they got from Buffalo at pick 168, Braxton Jones is athletic, somewhat raw, but once again, a guy that's going to get better. I think they really found something there. And then Zachary Thomas, not that Zach Thomas, but the older brother of Cameron Thomas, the linebacker, who I think is going to be a very, very good linebacker. And he's a good athlete, 6'4" and 7/8". He can play tackle or guard, 305 pounds, ran a 4.96 40, 21 bench reps. The only thing that scares me is that 22.5-inch vertical. That means that he needs to work on his lower body. Broad jump of 8'11", short shuttle 4.65, and a 3-cone of 7.4. And then I really like the last part of their draft more than the first part of their draft. Right before Thomas, they got Dominique Robinson from Miami of Ohio. And guy that came there as a wide receiver, had 327 receiving yards in his first couple of years before getting moved over to defense. 4.71 in the 40, 25 bench reps, 41-inch vertical, explosiveness, 10.1 broad jump, short shuttle of 4.19, and a 3-cone of 7.19. Those are really good numbers for a guy who's 6'5" and 8", 252 pounds. So he has a chance. Now, you're not going to replace Khalil Mack, but he has a chance to help them in their pass rush. Then looking at the 6th round where they had multiple picks, Tristan Abner, a running back by committee fit, a guy who's going to give you some quickness and speed and once again can help you in the turn game. Then they go back offensive line. They drafted a lot of offensive linemen. Doug Kramer, tough guy, all the things you hear about, smart and tough. Leader, guy who's going to help make line calls. Might be if worst case scenario, he's a swing guard center guy, but I think he eventually becomes a starter perhaps. And then Jari Carter, guard/tackle from Southern University. And then they finish off with 2 7th-rounders, Elijah Hicks from Southern California, and also Trenton Gill from NC State. I'm not sure if those guys make the team, but I think they might have some guys from the undrafted free agent class who will. Chase Allen from Iowa State has a chance, depending on how many tight ends they carry. I also really like a couple of the other guys they got in undrafted free agency. I mentioned Demontre Tuggle, who I think led the entire nation in all-purpose yardage through receiving, rushing, and return yardage. Drew Plitt from Ball State, I like him probably more than I should, but the guy had 9,061 yards, 62.4% completion percentage, 68 touchdowns, 30 interceptions in his career, had 14 rushing touchdowns in his career, so he can move a little bit, and was the team's emergency punter. So if you need an emergency punter, 33 and 2/3 yard average in 7 attempts. A few other guys that I think are interesting players, and this guy is listed as a tight end. He's a tryout guy. He's not a guy who's on the team, but he's a guy who's brought in for a tryout. Luke Little from Mary, and Mary University is obviously a D2 school. But he had 155 catches, 30 touchdowns, 2,423 yards, right? And in his 2 runs at the 40, ran 4.54 and 4.6, which may not set the world on fire until you remind yourself that this is a guy that's, 6'3" and change, 6'3" and a quarter, 225 pounds. So they are projecting him at tight end. And one of my favorite of the undrafted guys, of the tryout guys they brought in, is an undersized 3 technique named Ralph Holley from Western Michigan. I'm an enormous fan of his. His tape is fantastic. And he produced, in his career, 18.5 sacks, 45.5 tackles for loss, and 137 tackles in 40 games. Now, he's got Justin Jones and Mary Edwards Jr. ahead of him at the 3 technique spot. But I think he has a really good shot to make it. 6 feet and 3/4 of an inch, 297 pounds, 4.99 40, 24 bench reps, a vertical of 30 inches, 8'10" in the broad, short shuttle of 4.67, and a 3-cone drill of 7.53. And like I said, cheaper, more athletic. I also really like Christian Albright from Ball State, a guy who might make the team as a linebacker. But, all in all, looking at the class, they got a fair amount of quantity and a decent amount of quality. I don't think there's any superstars to be had anywhere on this class, but 3 or 4 of these guys are going to contribute early and the rest are going to stick. The Bears are building for the future.